Nay, Shalom, Shalom, Shalom. Call halal Yahweh, by Shem Yahushua, by Shem Kakadash. Double honors, of course, go out to the apostles, bishops, and elders, a great millstone, who through the Holy Spirit continue to give us His truth. This is Naaman with the DC camp. Salutations also go out to the fellow Akim out there on the highways and byways across the four corners of this earth. All right. Preaching this gospel with all honesty and sincerity in hopes of awakening the remaining hopeful elect. All right. This is from Smithsonian Magazine, and this goes into the horrible fate of John Casor, the first black man so-called to be declared slave for life in America. All right. This is also going to delve into the whiteness issue. All right. Certain people, for the first time, calling themselves white. All right. It says black people in early America weren't slaves. After this lawsuit, they could be. And this is from March of 2017. All right. It says the only date definitely connected to John Casor's life is this day in 1654 or 1655. It's not when he was born, when he achieved something, or when he died. It's when he became a slave. Casor was originally an indentured servant, which meant he was practically a slave in some senses. But what was bought or sold wasn't him, it was his contract of indenture, which obligated him to work for its holder for the period it set. At the end of that time, indentured servants who could be of any race were considered legally free and sent out into the world. This might sound like a rough deal, but indenture was how the British colonizers, who lived in what would later become the United States, managed to populate the land and get enough people to do the backbreaking work of farming crops like tobacco in the South. People who survived their period of indenture, many didn't, went on to live free lives in colonies, often after receiving some kind of small compensation like clothes, land, or tools to help them set up. All right. That was the incentive that caused many poor whites to indenture themselves and their families and move to the so-called New World. But Africans who were indentured were often captured and brought over against their will. That's what happened to the holder of Casor's indenture, Anthony Johnson. Johnson served out his contract, and just in case you didn't get what it's talking about here, Johnson is also a so-called black man. All right. It says Johnson served out his contract and went on to run his own tobacco farm and hold his own indentured servants, among them Casor. At this time, the colony of Virginia had very few black people in it. Johnson was one of the original 20. After a disagreement about whether or not Casor's contract was lapsed, a court ruled in favor of Johnson, and Casor saw the status of his indenture turn into slavery, where he, not his contract, was considered property. Casor claimed that he had served his indenture of 7 or 8 years, and 7 more years on top of that. Sound like a familiar story, huh? The court sided with Johnson, who claimed that Casor was his slave for life. So Casor became the first person to be arbitrarily declared a slave for life in the U.S. An earlier case had ended with a man named John Punch being declared a slave for life as a punishment for trying to escape his indentured servitude. His fellow escapees, who were white, were not punished in this way. Of course, as Wesleyan University notes, the transatlantic slave trade from Africa to the Americas had been around for over a century already, originating around 1500. Slaves, usually captured and sold by other African tribes, were transported across the Atlantic to the Americas, the university's blog notes, but they didn't give you the complete story on that, all right, because they love to push that narrative that Africans sold Africans, and that's not the case. They don't mention the Arabs that were involved in this. They don't mention, evidently right here, Well, that's the important thing there, because it was three. All right, Arabs, all right, Edomites, so-called whites, and Hamites. All right. It says around 11 million people were transported from 1500 to 1850, mostly to Brazil, and it's questionable with that number there, mostly to Brazil and the Caribbean islands. If they arrived in America, originally they became indentured servants. If they arrived elsewhere, they became slaves. Casor's story is particularly grim in hindsight. His slip into slavery will be followed by many, many other people of so-called African descent who were declared property. They were Israelites, not Africans, who were declared property in what became the United States. It was a watershed moment in the history of institutional slavery. Institutional. These certain words that separate what we went through and what others have gone through in the past. Something else you need to pay attention to. You have to, how this devil words things. All right, institutional slavery. All right, and it still goes on to this day. He says, about 7 years later, Virginia made this practice legal for everyone in 1661 by making it state law for any free white, black, or Indian to be able to own slaves. Here's the part, pay attention to. Along with indentured servants, Kyle writes, the step from there to a racialized idea of slavery wasn't a huge one, she writes. And by the time Johnson died in 1670, his race was used to justify giving his plantation to a white man rather than Johnson's children by his wife, Mary. He was not a citizen of the colony, a judge ruled, because he was black. So we're going to go from there to this one. All right. How whiteness was an issue. As soon as it loads, Salaki. All right. So it goes on. You see this devil here. Whiteness is an invented concept that has been used as a tool of oppression. And this is from, this is a Dutch piece of shit in Indonesia. All right. Look at him. That pose. Piece of shit. It says, whiteness is a modern colonial invention. It was devised in the 17th century and used to provide the logic for genocide and slavery. See, this is going into the methodology here. All right. Scriptures say, Sirach or Ecclesiastes chapter 5 verse 15 says, be not ignorant in any matter, great or small. All right. And you have to get into how this devil set this thing up and how it's become perpetual. All right. And this is what the Lord has to come back and stop. All right. As I pointed out, that word institutional. This is something that it's ingrained. This is the world over, and in particular in America, Britain, the Dutch, as you see here in this picture here, because you had those companies, the Dutch East Indian and West Indian, and then South Africa is populated by these motherfuckers who are in rulership down there. All right. Belgium, Germany, all right, and these are places where our people once ruled, but they don't tell you that. These are things you have to search out, all right. Again, be not ignorant, and then let me get that scripture, because this is what these devils love. Sirach or Ecclesiastes chapter 5 or 15, be not ignorant of anything in a great matter or a small. All right. Because what's that expression? The devil is in the details. And Jake, by and large, has the the focus and uh, attention span of a gnat. All right, and they know this. Let's see. Anyway, so it says the first recorded mention of white people, they say, and historians concur, they all agree, is in English playwright Thomas Middleton's 1613 play. So what? Just as I read to you about the case of Mr. Casor and Mr. Johnson, those things had to take place in order for the things that we know of today in history. Not that it was mentioned in the book. So what? It was mentioned in the book. So what? All right. But it became law because of certain events that happened. That court case I just mentioned in particular. All right. So now you got to understand, we had no, whereas the white so-called indentured servants, all right, they had some level of recourse. We did not, because we had no place. We had no, like I say today, we don't have any, what do they call it, consulate or embassy that we can go to and say, you know, these people are treating us. No, we don't have any landmass to point back to. That's another thing that fucks with your psyche. All right. We don't have any place to point to and say, because we've been driven out of our land. Africa was not our land. We were refugees there. All right. Our land has been occupied by what? Let's get real quick here. Let's see. By these devils, these Amalekites. Let's see. 36. And this is what they've done. It says, Ezekiel 36:1, it says, also thou son of man, prophesy unto the mountains of Israel, and say, ye mountains of Israel, hear the word of the Most High Yahweh. Point 2. Here's where we get into the point. It says, thus saith the Most High Yahweh, because the enemy, who's our enemy? The same people here. All right. Thus saith the Most High, because the enemy has said against you, aha, even the ancient high places are ours in possession. All right. Therefore prophesy and say, thus saith the Most High Yahweh, because they have made you desolate, and they certainly have, and swallowed you up on every side, that ye might be a possession unto the residue of the heathen, and ye are taken up in the lips of talkers, and darn infamy of the people. Let's go into that infamy of the people. Infamy of the people. Once again, Salakia, a little slow here. Got connection issues. Let's see. Infamy of the people. Talkers. Let's see what that is first. Strong's H. 3956. And that is Lashawan. Let's see. Tongue of men. All right. Babblers. Okay. Evil speakers, to be more precise. And let's see, what was the other one? Let's see. Other people, let's see. Let's see. I'm. All right. And they do. It says kinsman. Let's see. Me. Going into Hosea there. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, they got it in the bag, so they thought. Yeah. There says what? Because they have made you desolate, swallowed. Yeah, that's what they think. So they say in 2, it says, aha, even the ancient high place, the Balfour Declaration. All right. Let's see. Let's continue on. Hold on. Let's see. 4. Therefore, ye mountains of Israel, hear the word of the Most High Yahweh. Thus saith the Lord, power to the mountains, and to the hills, to the rivers, and to the valleys, to the desolate wastes, and to the cities that are forsaken, which became a prey, which we are, and derision to the residue of the heathen that are round about. Therefore, thus saith the Most High Yahweh, surely in the fire of my jealousy have I spoken against the residue of the heathen, and against all Idumea, the Greek way of saying Edom, so-called white people, no matter what they call themselves, French, Russian, German, Belgian, Swedish, Finnish, whatever, American, British, Dutch, whatever. They're all Edomites. Italian. All right. Ukraine, any of them motherfuckers. And it's ironic since, well, I'm not going to go into that. It's a whole nother video. Which have appointed my land into their possession. What? Balfour Declaration. With the joy of all their heart. When you read that letter, it starts off to Lord, which Rothschild was it? Oh man, let's get that real quick because that'll prove my point here. Balfour, let's see. Declaration. Let's see. Let's read this motherfucker right here. Which Rothschild was it? Let's see. William, well, some shit. Yeah. Anyway, it'll come up. Not Willard, what? Some strange fucking. Anyway, once again, I apologize for my connection issue here. Come on now. Here we go. It says, if I can blow it up a little bit, Dear Lord Rothschild, November 2nd, 1917. I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. Just took it. And will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. We know that's some bullshit. Or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. Walter Rothschild. Okay. That was who the letter is to. All right. So now we can go back to where I was. So, this is the big setup. And then we get here, and we get on down here, and it tells you the Dominican Republic, Morocco, India, New Zealand. All right. Barbados. I'm just skipping down for time's sake. I'll put, of course, the link in the description box. And it says in other Caribbean and Latin countries, the term white gradually replaced the term Christian as a designation for European settlers. It goes into Haiti. And then there are certain groups, their divisions, grands blocks, big whites, petites blocks, little whites, free colored slaves, etc., etc. Spanish and Portuguese colonizers. So you can see from this, there was never a let up. All right, it says whiteness as a political tool. What has made whiteness such an enduringly powerful tool is its nonsense logic. How ill-defined it is as a label, it can and has been defined in whatever way best serves to consolidate power for the ruling group. All right. Echoing the division between enslaved people and indentured servants centuries earlier, working class people in the 20th century were pitted against one another by appeals to whiteness. In his 1995 book, How the Irish Became White, American historian Noel Ignatieff, I guess that's how you say it, looks at 19th century Irish immigration to the U.S. They told you that, or you saw a glimpse of that in the movie, what was it, the Gangs of New York, which went back in that time period, all right? He details how these working class newcomers emphasized their distance from black laborers, thereby laying claim to whiteness. And that's a thing our people to this day, the majority of which do not understand. Everybody comes over here and tries to cuddle up to us, and whatever platform they have, it later takes root and they springboard off of us, and for lack of a better expression, and we always left holding the bag. We go nowhere. Hence the curse. Deuteronomy 28. Let's get that real quick. I believe it's 45. Hold on. Let's see. Deuteronomy 28. Or is it 43? I'll read 43 first. Hold on. Let's see. Here it is. The stranger that is within thee shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. There you go. 44. He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail. There you go. Sums it up. When whiteness is used to enact violence, etc., etc. All right, good article here. But the main point is, of course, that doesn't matter the dates that they give. We know from what they're saying here, this really didn't, as far as whiteness goes, it really didn't solidify itself until, like was always said, 1680s. All right, in that case with John Casor here, yeah, that is sad. Oops. You know, this is the horrible fate of John Casor or Casor, I can't, how it's pronounced, the first so-called black man to be declared slave for life in America. And after this, then the institution of whiteness took root. All right. That's when that happened. So this is the marker right here. This is the beginning points. All right. Hey, so with that, once again, hope whoever views this is edified. That's what we try to do here at Great Millstone. Filter everything through the scriptures. White, man. Oh, well, I might as well say this. People always, you'll hear so-called white people, pieces of shit, always say, get over it. Get over it. How can you get over it? You gotta understand the, well, I say you have to understand, a lot of people, you gotta understand there's a game being played here. They know exactly what they did. The problem is a lot of our people won't accept it. They don't want to know it. They just want to please their flesh the best way they can. Drown everything out through drugs and alcohol. And they're about to get a very rude awakening because this place is about to collapse out from under. All right. So my point being, let's get into what actually has happened here. I don't like to use Stockholm Syndrome for the simple fact It doesn't go deep enough. Let's go. Here's the expression I like to use because it goes more to what's actually going on. It's called colonial mentality. All right. And what it is, we'll get it here. We just read one over, the court case there with John Casor, who became the first so-called slave. As we know, chattel. All right. A colonial mentality is the internalized, that's the key there, internalized attitude of ethnic or cultural inferiority felt by people as a result of colonization. For example, them being colonized by another group. It corresponds with the belief that the cultural values of the colonizer are inherently superior to one's own. What do you see with our people? It goes beyond the blonde hair and all that shit. Internalized, that's part of it. But you believe whatever the so-called white man does or says. You believe that to be true. That's why white Jesus is such a devastating. And they know what they did. They know what they did. It was intent. The intent there, coming out of the Renaissance, going across the world. That's blasphemy. Portraying themselves as, if there is a Most High, He looks like them. Also the heavenly hosts. The damage it has done to our people. The term has been used by post-colonial scholars to discuss, and here's I don't know why I did that. It's so sensitive, Salakia. It says the term has been used. That's why I don't use the term Stockholm, because of this. Been used by post-colonial scholars to discuss the transgenerational effects that goes deeper than Stockholm. All right. The term has been used, transgenerational effects of colonialism present in former colonies following decolonization. So it stays, this is generation after generation after generation. So you can't fucking get over it. You tell people that say that, well, get over that Holocaust bullshit. Isn't that in the past? Oh, they start turning flips and everything else. It is commonly used as an operational concept for framing ideological domination in historical colonial experiences. In psychology, colonial mentality has been used to explain instances of collective depression, anxiety, and other widespread mental health issues in populations that have experienced colonization. So there you go. And there are other examples. They go down further here. I find it interesting that they use Filipinos as an example. But you got an urban dictionary meaning, see, Filipinos can all right. Let's go into this one, steps to healing a colonial mentality. First of all, all right, this is what has been done with us by and large, because what? We found out who we are and thus who our true power is. All right. That is the best way. So let's, as soon as this loads here. Let's see, let's read it from here. It says, colonial mentality is an internal oppression that is installed via external oppression, aka classical colonialism. There are 4 phases. Again, they're using Filipino here, so it's kind of, it's not us, but hey, you got Jakes amongst them. All right. There are four phases of classical colonialism, but the fourth and final phase is arguably the most insidious. This phase includes the establishment of a society in which the political, social, and economic institutions are designed to maintain the superiority of the colonizer and simultaneously subjugate the colonized. Which America is a prime example, because what? When we say it's structural racism, that's the definition. All right? It says, in other words, that colonized people begins to believe in their own inferiority and behaves accordingly. What's worse is that these paradigms are passed down for generations through family systems, which perpetuate these distorted rules of conduct. And that's usually through what? The woman. All right, so again, I'll put the links to these in the description box, and you can read them at your own leisure. So, hey, with that, shalom.